Hello and welcome back to Your Life Your Way. My guest today, Anne Marie Wells, I'm actually going to read her bio, and I've got permission ahead of time because I do believe that everything that she has been successful at and served and her life has just been so wow. Just wow. I mean, I'm going to let her tell you herself, but I just want to give her the accolades that she deserves. Anne Marie Wells is an award-winning poet, as well as a playwright, memoirist, and oral storyteller. She is the founder of the weekly Zoom show, The Joy of Poeting, and the author of two collections of poetry, The Joy of Poeting, and the author of two collections of poetry, survived by a memoir in verse plus other poems, and
Mother, comma, verb.
Verb, so I'm not misreading that, which won the 2023 Cinnamon Press Chapbook Contest. Congratulations. She has won several writing contests and earned a number of accolades, including Peter K. Hickson Memorial Award in Poetry, presented by Writers Relief, the Milestone Award presented by Wyoming Writers, Inc., the Rising Star Award presented by the Jackson Hole Chamber of Commerce, and two Pushcart Prize nominations. She is a certified listener poet, freelance editor, writing coach, and creative writing instructor. I will have her contact information in the show notes. But I also want to add that I watched her on a video read a book that she wrote for children called Mommy, Why Am I a Bird? And it was so sweet. Anne Marie, thank you so much for being here with us this morning.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Done so much and talk about your life your way. In the middle and between all of this, or coinciding with all of this, you've been a traveler, you've been a nanny, you've been a caregiver, you are married, you have children, you are just living life your way.
I would say I have gone non-traditional routes to achieve everything as well.
Not boring.
Not boring, no. I keep everybody on their toes, including myself.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And it also comes to, I think it makes a huge difference in the aging process as well. Because if we keep growing, keep learning, keep exploring, like you said, taking what was it? The, I know there's an unbridled path, but the path not taken, choose the different path. It really can open us up so much. So I would
Absolutely.
love, you and I have talked before, and I have so many notes because there's just so many things about you that are so exciting to listen to. And you do have a lot of really, really important messages for everyone, but I speak specifically to women, and I think your messages are very important. So I would love if you would just start by telling us more about you and the path that you've been on, and how did you first start, and maybe why taking that different path.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't want to say that I'm a rebel or contrarian. I
Go
don't
ahead.
but I don't go out of my way to be this way. It's not that I say, "Oh, I'm gonna do it my way." It's just that the paths that are generally laid out haven't worked for me. And so I have to make my own path because it's not working. I'm blocked, there's an obstacle, I have to divert and go around it. And I think it started at a young age. When I was 4 years old, I broke my arm roller skating and I wouldn't do any of the PT exercises. And so for gross motor skills, my mom put me in gymnastics, and for fine motor skills, she put me in piano lessons. And so, I mean, from the start, just how you're supposed to do things just didn't work for me. And so I had to have these like creative alternative ways of doing things. Later on, as I grew up, I went to college and none of the programs were calling to me. I ended up doing what was called a special program where I designed my own curriculum. Now, this is not easy. I had to come up with what I wanted to study from the courses that were allowed or that were offered at my school at the University of Buffalo. I had to find two faculty members who would sign off on the curriculum that I created. I had to create a whole presentation as to what I was going to do in my career and maybe further studies that would justify this route and why the current offerings at the school weren't sufficient to achieve those goals. I had to then present all of that information to a panel of faculty who didn't know me, and then wait for a response. And I didn't get a like satisfactory until I was a junior in college. And the pressure was on that it was like either I was about to do my final year in school or I was going to have to reevaluate and maybe do a fifth year. And it was approved, and I graduated with what's called a special major. But then in grad school, I went to grad school for ecology, and all of my colleagues were doing field research or lab experiments, and that wasn't working for me either. And I ended up having a faculty advisor that was outside of the normal panel of available researchers or academics who were available, who was doing more of a social study on ecological education for early childhood. And so I ended up creating a more of a social study of, can I teach complicated ecological concepts? Can I break it down so that preschoolers can understand it? And what would be that process? So I ended up creating a framework for doing just that. And that's how I ended up writing Mommy, Why Am I a Bird? That's what influenced that children's book. But as all of my colleagues are presenting their very stringent protocols of testing toxoecology in seagrasses and things, and I come up and I'm like, preschool ornithology, and it's all rainbow and cutesy, and here's my children's book. It was, everybody was like, what is this about? And to do that, I went to grad school. Again, outside the norm, I went to grad school in Portugal at the University of Coimbra. It was much less expensive than going to school in the States. And so in order to do this, I had to learn Portuguese. You know, I'm not making things easier for myself by doing this, because none of the preschoolers, of course, spoke English. So
but you didn't quit anywhere along the way. You didn't quit.
No, so I went into intensive Portuguese training. People were shocked that when they're like, oh, when did you start learning Portuguese? Like 3 weeks ago? And they're like, what? So, I mean, from the get-go, I have been, I don't know, kind of a wayward child, that I'm always wandering off the path that everybody else is taking because it's not working for me for some reason.
I love that. I can remember my father always saying, why do you have to be different? Aren't we all? We are all given this life to just embrace and explore and do. And I think with everything that you've said so far, and there's so much more, you do show you don't have to follow the norm. You don't have to follow what's expected, through all that conditioning, through all that life. We do have, I'm a firm believer, we have our own path. We have our own path. There's many times I've called myself a rebel, especially in my years with my dad and the debate, sometimes fighting, about what I wanted and who I was and all that. But I think most important is not quitting. And there's such an influence to quit. And especially when you say, I learned Portuguese. I learned, you must have learned a lot in 3 weeks. And you needed to do that, but you didn't quit. You didn't give up. You dove into it. At the college, you created your path. You created your form to present.
A lot more work for me, you know? So it's not like I'm trying to cut corners and not do things the way that people normally do them because I'm too lazy or because, I want something easier. I'm not making anything easier for myself trying to do this.
Do you think you've paved a path and that's what I love. You're here and you're sharing. And if we can touch one woman to say, okay, I can do this. Do you feel you're paving a path and showing other women that, yeah?
I hope so. I hope that other women can look to my example and say, this isn't working for me, so I'm going to try something different. I mean, literally everything that I've ever done, my relationship, having a child, none of it was the traditional route. Even my career now, got a master's degree in ecology, but now I'm a poet. I do write a lot of nature poetry, and I love being outside, and it is one of my greatest inspirations. But the universe did not show me a path to having a career in what I went to school for, and my path has just been this kind of windy trail. yeah, everything has been a surprise. Everything has been a surprise.
To me, I when hearing you speak and telling your journey, it's what comes to my mind is it was your soul's path.
Maybe, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
beautiful. And you were also a nanny somewhere in there, if I remember correctly.
Yes, I was a nanny for many years. So after I had graduated from grad school, I started working in preschools, which led me to working as a private tutor and nanny. And I even was a nanny for a rock and roll band while they were on a summer tour. They had just had one infant girl, and I was their nanny while they were playing shows or practicing. And that was a wild ride, living out of a suitcase for 3 months. And that gave me a lot of experience with babies. It gave me a lot more confidence to potentially have a child of my own someday. I did. So this jump into a career of writing, I feel like I have a path that's a lot of winding, then sprint. And so a lot of things happen all at once. So I was working as a nanny, but while also trying to apply for jobs in my field. So this was not for lack of trying. I was living in the greater Yellowstone area, which you would think, ample jobs for ecologists, and I was not finding anything outside of a interim internship, 3 months get stint here, 3 months stint here, no benefits, only a stipend, no regular wage, those kinds of jobs. So when I finally did score a position as the executive director of a nature-based nonprofit organization, I thought I had landed my dream job. I mean, at the time it was. Not a month in, my father was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And I uprooted my entire life. I was living in Wyoming at the time in the greater Yellowstone area, and I moved to Florida to be there and to caretake for him at the end of his life. I started working remotely. This was pre-Zoom. This was 2019. So before Zoom had erupted, I was working remotely half time, and then I went to quarter time, and then finally I resigned because I realized I didn't care. Like, nothing mattered to me more than caring for my father and to be there for him at the end of his life. In the meantime, I did do some writing on the side. I wrote some plays, they won some awards, some were staged. But I had this moment where when my father with his stage 4 cancer, he collapsed at home and we rushed him to the emergency room. It turned out that he had pneumonia and sepsis on top of his cancer. And I thought that was going to be his last day on earth. He was so weak, he couldn't hold an ice chip in his mouth. And I was sitting on this little sofa next to his hospital bed, not being able to sleep, and I was compelled to write a poem. I have no idea why. People say, "What inspired you to write a poem?" And I tell them, a ghost told me, because I really don't have a reason. I never wrote poetry before then. I wasn't a poet. I didn't read poetry books even. It wasn't my genre, but for some reason I was compelled to write a poem about that moment, about remembering my dad, what I wanted to remember about him. I didn't even have a pen and paper. I pulled a receipt out of the bag that I had, and I borrowed a pen from the nurse's station to write this poem on the back of a receipt that I later sent to a literary magazine, and it ended up being published in a literary magazine.
Was that the Survived?
It's in my book Survived By. It's the poem titled I Will Remember You This Way. And I actually had the privilege of being able to tell my father that it was accepted for publication before he passed away. And somebody had asked me, like, do you still have that receipt? And no, I don't, because at the time I had no idea that that was going to be a precipice for the career that I have now. I had no idea that I was going to, at that point, I hadn't resigned from my job. I had no idea that I was going to have this entire new career. And after he passed away and I was unemployed, I took a entry-level job as a caretaker for adults with disabilities. And I went back to school, for English, taking courses part-time. But because I had a lot of those core courses already, I was able to graduate in just 1 year. Everything was online now because then suddenly we entered the COVID pandemic. Everything was virtual. So where I was living in rural Wyoming, there wasn't a university nearby, but I was able to take classes online suddenly that weren't available to me before. I went back to school. I ended up going into another online course called the Community Literature Initiative Poetry Publishing Program. It was a year-long course that was originally in person that now was virtual and online. So I was able to learn a lot immediately, see a lot of these little successes of this poem was accepted into a literary journal, and so on and so forth. And suddenly this career in poetry blossomed, flourished even. And it didn't seem hard. And it didn't seem like I had to go on these wandering paths and there were all these obstacles and I had to make my own way. It just happened. It was like cork of the champagne was removed and now I was overflowing. But once that had been revealed to me, then I could fully embody what I was supposed to be in the first place. And that it just didn't occur to me until then.
And I wonder with everything, because you have had such an interesting path and journey, that I think we're always where we are in the moment, where we're supposed to be. You say, well, I didn't even know it was going to be. I didn't have, there were so many signs,
Mm-hmm.
and you took the right turns and you did the right thing, because this is where ultimately you were supposed to end up.
Yeah.
And everything that you've done, don't you think everything that you've done and experienced, no matter how difficult or maybe how exhausting it might have been at the time or challenging, it's been so worth it to reach this final point, and the lessons that you learned through each experience just, first of all, it gives you a whole lot to write about.
It
A
does, yes.
whole lot to write about. But tell me in your words how it makes you feel now that you look back and you see this path and now you've reached this point and you go, what do you see? How do you see that? Do you see that there have been signs? I mean, that was a sign when you're with your dad and all of a sudden, you're called to write a poem.
Yeah,
And you
and
listen
before
to them.
then, like I said, I had done some writing, but not poetry. I also did oral storytelling and won a number of story slams in my area. And before my dad passed away, when he was in hospice, and I was giving him a sponge bath, and I don't know, I don't think we were even talking. He was watching the TV, and I was just trying to make sure he felt clean. And he just out of the blue said, if you want to tell stories about all this, you can. And he gave me that permission. Yeah. And I did. I turned that experience into my first full-length book that was published. Survived By is a chronicle of my experience learning about my dad's illness and the poetry that I wrote and my experience through his death, and then the subsequent bereavement and healing and learning from that experience. All of the bad and the ugly mostly, and then a little bit of shining good at the end. And I was grateful for that permission, because then this book is very intimate, and it shows, like I said, the bad and the ugly. And I didn't have to feel like, oh, well, maybe he wouldn't want me to share these details. And he gave me permission that it was okay
Wonderful.
to do that. Yeah.
Your experience with your dad, and we did touch on this a little bit, talked a little bit in depth about caregiving. What could you, if you feel, maybe offer something to other people that are caregivers for a loved one? It is a tough path.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely changes the dynamics of your life.
100%.
And there's a lot of joy, there's a lot of guilt, there's a lot of exhaustion. What would you offer to others who are caregivers for a loved one or may ultimately be in that?
Mm-hmm. I think what I didn't have that I wish that I had was community. I wish that I could have talked to anyone else who understood what I was experiencing.
Bingo.
I was only 33 when I lost my dad, and I know that people are much younger than I am when they lose their parent. I had a friend who lost his dad when he was 21, and he was his primary caregiver. Another friend of mine lost her mom to cancer when she was 9. So I know that people are much younger than 33 when their parents pass away, for sure. Also, none of my friends were experiencing it at the same time or at all, like close friends. They weren't their parents' caregiver when their parent passed away. So they didn't know that kind of exhaustion and burnout. And so, one thing that I'm trying to do now to combat that is to create community. And I am on the advisory board for what's called the Caregiver Haven. It's through the Good Listening Project, and it is a support group for caregivers. It's an hour long, and it's totally free. It's totally free for anybody who identifies as a caregiver to participate in, to just be in community and to have a little bit of creative outlet to express maybe some catharsis about what you're experiencing. I only had to caregive for my dad in hospice for 2 weeks. He was bedridden for 2 weeks at the end of his life. And I know people are doing it for months and or years on end. It's tiring, emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually tiring. It's also financially exhausting. I resigned from my job. I didn't have any other income at the time. And I just wish that I had anybody else to say, like, I know what that's like. Like that is so hard. And or hear about their experience with it as well, to just not feel so alone in it.
Yes,
And
I
yeah.
often call it the forgotten
Yeah.
path because it is it, and we can't expect people that have not been in this position to understand.
Right.
And the things that they say, they mean well, but it doesn't
Absolutely.
ultimately help. And I think so much, and coming back to us as women, we do like to feel that we don't want to bother people, and
Mm,
we can carry the load, and we're meant to be in community. We're meant to be in sisterhood. We're meant to be, and it's not just, there are many men that are caregivers too. And I don't
mm-hmm.
want to leave them out of this conversation because it's hard for them as well. We need community. And
100%.
I was very glad to hear about the Caregiver Haven, and please take some time, and I will also have that link in the show notes as well. You have offered in our previous conversation so many points that I think really hit home in everything you've done. And one thing that you had said, and you've just mentioned it as well, is to feel less alone. And I think that comes into so many aspects of your life, experiences of your life, whether you're traveling and you've gone to Portugal, you're going to school, you're starting over, now you're in a new place, you're having to learn a new language. How did you feel less alone doing that?
Yeah, so another one of those signs that I didn't see in the moment was that I blogged. And I had a blog while I was abroad, and it went viral for a little bit. That was like really popular in Portugal. And I would go into like a cafe and I would overhear people that I didn't even know talking about my blog.
Cool. That's
Yeah,
cool.
I was like a little bit of a local celebrity for the short time that I was there. And this was over 10 years ago. So, it's not like it hasn't lingered or anything. But I was able to connect with others through my writing. And I started my blog mostly just because I had so many friends or family members interested in what I was doing, and it was redundant to have to retell my story to each
Good
individual
point.
person. So I just had this blog. Oh, you are interested in what I'm up to? This is what I'm up to. It was part diary and complaining about my grad program or whatever, but also it was a way for me to connect with my friends and family back in the States, and also for new people in Portugal who were interested in my experience as an American in Portugal. I poked fun at the differences between the cultures, the things that I understood, the things that I didn't understand, the many ways that I would say penis by accident in Portuguese. There's so many examples. They have a lot
That's
of lot of
hilarious.
slang for that particular body part, and they sound very similar to other normal words, and I would just have a mispronunciation. I mean, this happens so many times. So many times. So I was able to poke fun at myself a lot as well, and I made friends. Yeah, I had a girlfriend that while I was there, and we were madly in love. It didn't work out at the eventually because I moved back to the States and she stayed there. She helped me to make other friends. I was introduced to her friend group, and that helped me. I also was a part of an international student group. So I had friends who were from Ethiopia and Brazil and the Netherlands and Austria. There were all of us all kind of coalescing together as well. So, um,
Beautiful experience to have that. that exposure to so many different cultures and people, personalities, languages, all of it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think because I did speak Portuguese, I learned to speak Portuguese, and many of the international students didn't. I mean, if you're from Brazil, then you speak Portuguese. English was like the common language, but because I learned Portuguese, that opened more doors for me to connect with people who didn't feel confident in their English speaking. I made friends with the women who were at the open air market. So I had like a fruit lady, I had a vegetable lady, I had a cheese lady, I had an egg lady, and they all knew me because I was the American who spoke Portuguese, and they would say like, "Oh, you look hungry. Take an extra cantaloupe with you." Or they're like, "Oh, I just got this new cheese and do you want to have a little sample?" And it's like, "Oh, yes, I do."
Definitely on the
Uh,
cheese.
I felt like I was very taken care of because I was a novelty. Not many people, I think, went out of their way to learn their language. And so I was able to connect with them on their level rather than trying to get them to speak English with me. And I think that that helped me a lot as well to open doors to new opportunities and better connections.
You've mentioned the word doors a few times, and I think that's an interesting point to touch on because I hear the saying, when one door closes, another door opens, but we have to allow them to open. And then I used to work with someone who used to say, when the door opens, you have to walk your happy ass through it yourself. And that's the truth. And sometimes you have to make the door open yourself, like you did.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect example was in college, writing your own path in college.
Mm-hmm.
You made the door open.
Mm-hmm.
And how would you touch on that and explain how to do it if it's you're afraid to open it, and if it's somebody's holding it shut? How have you dealt with that, and how would you recommend to women to work that door, whether it's force it open or make your own door?
Yeah, and I think that a lot of fear stems from lack of trust. So you don't trust that walking through the door will either make things better or different or new or whatever, or maybe they would be worse. So I think because over the years, I've had so many experiences, including failures, that I have been able to overcome, that I've been able to pick myself up and brush myself off from. I trust myself to figure it out. So I am not afraid to go through the door or open a door because if it closes or it doesn't work out, I trust myself to figure it out. And I think a really great example is having a baby with my partner. So we were friends. We had gone on a date, but um, and it went really well, but we lived I used to live in Wyoming. I had moved away back to Virginia, but I was visiting again and he and I went on a date, but then I was going back to Virginia, so we're a continent apart. And I was 35 and just watching my window of opportunity closing for having a child and going on terrible Bumble dates and nothing is working out. And I said to myself, like, do I have a friend who might want to be a parent as badly as I want to? And maybe we could do this together in a non traditional family way. And I immediately thought of Matt and I thought about what a kind hearted, emotionally intelligent, adventurous, put together, stable, employed person that he is with no addictions, just steady. And I sent him a message saying like exactly what I just said to you. Like I am watching my window of opportunity close and was thinking to myself, is there someone else out there who might also want to have a child and is watching their window of opportunity close? And I said, I think you're an adventurous person and a kind hearted person, open minded person. And if I had a child who grew up to be just like you, I would feel really proud of that. And I also said, like, I also know we should probably have a phone call about this, but I was so anxious about sending you this message in the first place. And it took a lot of courage for me to send it that, I just decided to do it this way. And after about a minute, he responded, like, yeah, a phone call would be great. And so that was in October of 2022, I think, 2021, 2022. And the summer of the following year, we got pregnant, and now we're married. And from my original plan of just having a child with a friend whom I trusted and respected, we ended up falling in love, and we have more of a traditional family now. But the way that we got there is very non-traditional. And he mentions quite often, maybe once a month, how he's grateful that I had the courage to ask him such a direct question if he was willing to co-parent with me. And many people are like, "Oh my God, like how would you even dare to ask somebody something so strange?"
But look where it brought you. Look where it brought you. If only we would just embrace so much more. And like you said, you trusted yourself, you trusted to just ask.
But I figured that if the answer was no, well, he lived in Wyoming, I lived in Virginia, like I would never have to see him again.
There you go. There you go.
If I was totally humiliated. But I also trusted him because we were friends. Like, we weren't very close friends, but we were friends. When my dog passed away, he sent me a care package. We were friends. I trusted that if the answer was no, that it wasn't going to ruin our friendship, that wasn't going to be the end, or that, and that he wasn't going to humiliate me. Like, he wasn't going to be like, "Oh my God, like how dare you ask me that? Like, ew, I would never want to have a child with you. Gross." I knew that he wasn't going to react that way. So I had trust in him, but I also had trust in me that even if I felt embarrassed or cringy about it, I would get over it and I would move on. And at that point, I was looking into sperm donation and IUI and solo parenting, but I was also afraid of doing it alone. And I'm glad that I didn't have to do it alone, especially through pregnancy. That was a really unpleasant experience, and having his support through that was critical. So I'm glad that it worked out exactly the way that it was supposed to. But again, non-traditional path.
And I'm a firm believer that we need our fear. Our fear was meant to protect us and keep us safe. But I also believe that we can create a new relationship with our fear. And in some cases, you can have a friendship with your fear and move through things together to stay safe, but not to keep your life controlled where you're afraid to walk through the door. And that's one thing that you had mentioned before about facing your fear and self-trust. And it's so important. We don't trust ourselves enough to just try. And I heard someone else say recently that why fear the unknown? Because you don't even know what it is. When you think about it, it does really kind of make sense.
Yeah, I think that fear is that the fear that it's going to be worse or it's not going to work out. And and I always think, like, what if it's better? And then if it is worse,
Exactly.
reject it. If it is worse,
Exactly.
reject it.
You know, people said when I was moving, I had just bought a house the year before, and I decided to move here to South Carolina. And people started saying, well, what if it doesn't work out? Well, then I'll go somewhere else. I'll figure something out. It's not going to be the end of the world.
Right. 100%. Yeah.
And the experience of doing that and something different that you thought you would never do. Talk about self-growth, finding out who you are and learning more about yourself. And I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't trade it.
Yeah, 100%.
How do you feel? Are you serving others and helping others write poetry or?
Yes, yes, yes. So, with my weekly Zoom show, The Joy of Poeting, I demonstrate a different kind of poem every week and have had some special guests join me as well. Poetic forms that they've invented or that they're, well versed in. And I do that. It's free or donation based. I also facilitate a number of creative writing workshops through public libraries or other writing groups, writers' conferences, and things like that. So I dabble here and there. I've taught some longer courses on introductory poetry through the Community Literature Initiative and the Poetry Lab. I'm kind of all over the place. I also do private coaching. I have a few clients who are looking to publish their poetry chapbooks or their full-length collections. I also am working with a woman who's publishing a narrative nonfiction memoir / self-help book, and so I'm helping her through that process and giving her guidance on writing. And yeah, I have a lot of irons in the fire, a little here, a little there. And I think the most important aspect for me is just getting more voices out there. It doesn't hurt to have more voices, and each person whose voice does get out there, they're going to have their own ripple effect, their own domino effect for the
Exactly.
network that they're connected to, and so on and so forth. And I like having a little tiny part in all of that.
What would you offer someone who really wants to start writing, but they're afraid, or maybe they've not had the support or the encouragement to put their words and their feelings and thoughts on paper? What would you advise? Where to begin? How to begin?
Yeah, I mean, the first place is to just do what I call narrative writing. It's just personal, like writing a diary and starting there and then working your way outside of that. So I started with blogging and letting your own natural voice come out. I think a lot of people are afraid of being bad at it. And I think the more you can embrace, you will be bad at it. Like you will have training wheels before you go on your own dirt bike. To just say, I'm allowing myself to struggle through something because eventually I will get there. Or to just not care. Like you don't have to publish in literary journals. You don't have to publish a New York Times best-selling memoir or something like that. You can just write for yourself. There are no rules that say that you have to do something in order to make progress and get better and to achieve or to climb the rungs. That I feel like that kind of mindset is very toxic. So if you just do it for yourself, that is also great. But if you are the type of person who does want to see your writing published, to say to yourself, okay, I need to suck before I can get better. And the people who persist through sucking are the people who actually do get published. The people who do not persist because they can't bear their ego, their self esteem can't bear not writing the way that they want to yet, they're the ones who never see success because they can't get past that hump.
And I think exactly what you said fits anything you're trying new and different. We just have to start sucking at it first because you didn't come out of the womb knowing how to do it, whether it's writing, whether it's playing tennis, whether
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter what it is. It's you have to learn how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I had someone, I was afraid to write for years. I would write, just went through a period of my life where I was just writing little poems, and I stopped doing that. And I really would like to get back to doing that. But I had someone who was a supervisor make a really rude comment about how I couldn't write. I was
Mm-hmm.
had to write something for work. And that stuck with me for years.
Mm-hmm.
Years. Silly me. And just recently I started writing some blogs. And of course, writing and posting on social media takes, and I've had other people tell me, well, you need to temper how you're speaking. No, no. So shedding these things that we are influenced by,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's influence, program, conditioning, we carry those things. And if you can just put pen to paper, if you can just put one foot in front of the other and stop worrying what everyone else thinks.
Right.
And it's a
And not everyone's going to like what you write anyway. Like no matter what you
exactly.
write, no matter who you are. And the example I like to give for that is that I, a poet, do not care for Mary Oliver's poetry. And that is like sacrilege to say in the poetry world. She's such an icon. And I think that she's a wonderful person or was a wonderful person. And it's not anything, denigrating to her. I have read a lot of her poetry and it has not connected or resonated with me. I don't get the appeal, but that's me. And who am
Yeah.
I? She won a Pulitzer Prize. She won all these other awards. She's like such a poetry celebrity. And I personally don't care for her work. So there's always going to be someone or even a group of people who is going to read your work and think like, oh wow, like I don't get the appeal. I had one person read my collection of poetry and say something along the lines of like, God, do I have to read one more poem about a dead parent? It's like, well, that is what the book is about. So like it's like going to a hardware store and saying, God, is this only hardware? Like, yes,
Yes, it is.
this is the store that you've walked into.
Just move on.
If that's not what you're looking to buy,
Better
then
go to another place.
you're in the wrong place. Yeah, exactly. So there's always going to be critics and there's always going to be someone who doesn't appreciate whatever you create, art. If your singing voice,
Thank you. Yes, I've been very good and I haven't gone down that podium. I get on that and it's hard for me to get off.
That no matter what you do, there are always going to be people who say you're not doing it right, they can do it better, or they don't like how you're doing it, whatever it is. Like, there's always going to be those people, but then there will also be those people who say, "Thank you so much. I needed this. Thank you for putting
Yes, if
yourself
you could
out
touch
there. I
one
needed
person.
this." Yeah. And that's who your audience is. That's who you're writing for. That's who you're doing whatever it is you're doing for. Is that person.
Beautiful. Your journey. When I ask the question, what does your life, your way mean to you now? What would you answer?
Yeah, I think now that I'm a mom, my son's 14 months old now, there's a lot of mom chatter. And like, you have to do things this way, you have to do things that way. Your child will die if
Yeah.
you do this. And make sure your child's eating this and blah, blah, blah. Put them in music lessons and all of these, you must, and this is the right way. And I'm doing my best. I'm doing my best. The way that I parent is going to be different than the way that my neighbor parents. It's going to be different than the way that my mom parented me. Everything is going to be a little bit different. I'm doing it the way I feel in my heart, in my soul that I want to do it. And that's, I try to block everything else out of, you're not doing this or you're doing this and you're endangering your child or blah, 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 blah. Like, it's a lot of information and there's a lot of shame and blame, and I'm not here. I'm not here for it. I'm doing the best that I can. So I think your life, your way right now for me, I mean, is just doing my best.
Beautiful answer.
Yeah.
Beautiful answer.
Yeah.
Which I will have in the show notes anyways, but if you would offer now, how can folks reach out to you?
Yeah, I think the best place is my website, AnneMarieWellsWriter.com. If you type in Anne Marie Wells into Google, there are others. There are other Anne Marie Wellses, but I'm the most prominent one that pops up into the Google search, whether you spell my name incorrectly or not. So if you find me on my website, you can contact me there. I also have my links to my social media accounts there. I love interacting with people. If people listen to this and they want to share a story, whatever, I personally write back. I'm not that famous that I have like an assistant like sending out form emails to people. I personally respond to everybody who writes to me. Please don't be mean or rude. Otherwise, I won't respond to those. If you have something not mean or rude or creepy to share with me, then I will personally respond.
Beautiful. Thank you. Anne Marie, thank you so much for being with us today. I so appreciate your sharing
Thank you, Kathleen.
Your journey. It's been exciting. It's been enlightening. And I think if the very least if we encourage one person to open a door, we've done our best today.
Yes, I agree.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you everyone for being here with the Your Life, Your Way show. And as your host, Kathleen McDermott, I look forward to bringing you many, many more beautiful guests such as Anne Marie. And please reach out to her. Offer your comments, your thoughts, and questions, and be kind. Don't be creepy. Thank you so much. Everyone have a blessed day.